Sweet. Today, I want to discuss lookism. Lookism can be defined as the construction of a standard for beauty and attractiveness, and judgments made about people on the basis of how well or poorly they meet the standard. Um, I think, in simpler terms, lookism is kind of just the basic definition is it's kind of like discriminating against those who are deemed less attractive or less desirable in their outward appearance. So that's where the look, it's very much fixated on visual attractiveness, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so the reason why I kind of want to discuss this is because I think it's more prevalent in today's day and age more than ever, I'd say. I think most people would agree with me, not necessarily all people. I'd say it's certainly an issue, a topic, a problem, whatever you want to call it, that has been prevalent in human society as long as there has been human society. Human beings, we're very, very visual creatures. Don't quote me on this, but I think I read a stat somewhere that when it comes to like our five senses, like auditory, visual, taste, scent, I think 90% of what we receive is visual, which is kind of crazy considering we have five senses. Um, but yeah, so the reason why I think it's more prevalent in today's day and age is because of the internet and primarily social media. In the past decade or so, maybe decade and a half, that's kind of when Facebook really started to take off, as well as things like Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. That's when we saw more of a just meteoric rise in the use of these apps on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. And I think those go hand in hand with lookism. Would you agree with me on that, or?
I would. And like you said, right? Social media, all of those things, they remove all of our five senses except for the visual. Like that is the only thing that we can convey through technology.
That is very
So
true.
becomes our focus.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to put that. Never even really thought about it like that. Um, but yeah, so I will say in my experiences, what I've seen with social media is, um, I mean, we're all human beings, right? And we operate in a physical world. Um, Obviously, some people are more spiritual than others, but beyond the physical, we have mental capacity, et cetera, et cetera. But I think social media, when it gets down to it, it's eliminating virtually all of that and then focusing on the physical. That is to say, when it comes to your appearance, and like visual input and output, social media gives us the opportunity to kind of curate our own self-image. That is to say, as human beings, we have our self-image. I have my body and I have my voice, and it's just right here, right now. And no one can see it, no one can experience it unless you're physically with me. But social media allows you to have a 24/7 presence. A 24/7 presence that anyone can access at any time, anyone can observe, and thus when they observe and interact with that social media presence, you can kind of form opinions and beliefs and stances and outlooks about this individual. Right? So it's like, oh, this person is attractive, this person is intelligent, this person is successful. And you get all of these kind of um, beliefs, opinions, whether they're true or not, from social media, right? So so if you put it that way, it's very logical that if you have the ability to customize and kind of pick and choose what you want to share on your social media profiles, why wouldn't you elect to share that which is favorable, that which is better? And of course, I guess you could say that's subjective, but we can discuss more what we think favorable is, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I mean, another thing that kind of goes hand in hand, and most people know this, like rates of anxiety, depression, just mental illness in general. It's kind of scary the parallels we've seen with social media usage and rates of mental illness, especially in our generation. Our generation being people early 20s, even younger than that. And it's really crazy to me to think, like, I mean, we're young adults now in our early 20s, but I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine like for this generation of teenagers and like even like preteens, like I mean they grew up with it from day one basically, and that's kind of crazy to think about. Whereas for us, we kind of did too, but it we saw the rise like kind of coincide with our rise into adulthood, or at least young adulthood. Would you agree with me on that?
Right. It's almost like a childhood thing. And I think actually that's I think something that people talk about a lot if you want to describe like our generation. A lot of people will mention like, oh, I don't use those much anymore. That's something I did in high school, or that's something I did in middle school. I mean, obviously we don't know what the younger generations will do or how they will feel about it. But for now, they definitely still use like Snapchat and Instagram and all those kinds of social medias that are very based on looks.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and I'll say, I mean, my youth or like adolescence, not that long ago, teenage years, like I remember back then, I was always under the impression, I mean, social media is designed for kids, at least young people. So I kind of thought ahead to the future. I was like, wait, when I'm like 20, 25, will I even have all this stuff anymore? Like, that doesn't feel right. Like, shouldn't the adults be doing different things? Like, this feels like it's for kids. But I mean, I guess now, I disagree with you a little bit because I feel like now social media caters to all age ranges. I'd say from preteens to maybe not like senior citizens, but preteens to anyone who is young enough or current enough to understand like technology, the internet, etc. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree.
I think I somewhat agree, but it's still mainly focused on the younger audience, mainly because we grew up with it. Because thinking about it, I can't think of a whole lot of looks-based social media that's catered to like senior citizens and above. Maybe I'm just missing. Maybe I'm just like missing something super obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. I think it does kind of go hand in hand with, and that was something I was gonna bring up. I mean, the topic we're discussing is lookism, which I think is very fixated. It's anchored to things like youth and beauty and sex appeal and things of that nature. And I would even say it's extended beyond just those things. So there's a Kanye West quote that I really like. He said, "This new generation is obsessed with looking successful, not being successful." So to me, that kind of caters into lookism as well. It's like, it's kind of subscribing to the notion that seeing is believing, perception is reality. And to me, I dislike this notion that we humans, we're so judgmental, we're so quick to reach a conclusion, and that first impressions are so dang important that like if we interact with someone and right off the bat we're not impressed, then they're insufficient or something like that. I don't know, maybe I'm off target here, but that's personally how I feel. What do you think are the oh, sorry, were you about to say something?
I was going to say, it sounds really shallow, but I think you're unfortunately right. Like, we like to look at people and make snap decisions, right? We want to look at someone and say, like, oh, I like that person, or I don't like that person, or I like their vibe. You don't really know what their vibe is, but you know what they look like, and you can make snap judgments based off of that.
Right.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, what do you think are some dangers of feeding into lookism too much, or just negative aspects associated with lookism?
I think the one that comes to mind, or like the biggest one, is like obviously if everyone wants the same look and you all shoot for the same look, then everything starts becoming really standardized. And what comes to mind, at least like off the top of my head, is like trends. So like clothing trends, everyone wants to dress the same, everyone wants to look good. But then if there's like a very narrow definition of that, then I'll follow it pretty narrowly, and it kind of stifles creativity. But then again, who are we to judge? We like the things we like, and those trends change over time.
Very true, very true. Yeah, I think the aperture for creativity and self-expression is just gradually getting narrower and narrower, then it's not. I don't think that's healthy for society. See, I'm conflicted because don't get me wrong, I love physical beauty. I mean, I'm heterosexual. I can tell you I love a beautiful woman, and I think outward appearance is important. But there's things that are so much more important, so much more important. And I mean, I don't have to tell you that. Most people know that. I'm sure people listening to this know that. But I almost feel like we're feeding into it too much, like too much vanity, too much about like maybe even invoking jealousy, needing to feel like the best, the sexiest, etc., etc. And I think it's really unhealthy, especially how it's targeted towards the youth. And I would go so far as to say even it's catered more towards women, I'd say. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't.
I would agree with that, and it also is it's very strange, I think, in the way that it manifests. Like, obviously, people have like different responses to it, right? Some people feel it really strongly, like, oh, I should look a certain way, so I'm going to dress a certain way, and then some people see it and reject it pretty strongly.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on what I see, so like full disclosure, I'm a high school teacher, so I see all the young trends, and then I'm one of those old people who's like, I don't understand that trend. That
Old
seems
people. Okay.
well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
Well, I just,
sorry, what were you gonna say?
well, it's just funny because like I teach younger students. So some of the younger students, they dress the way that their parents dress them. They don't care what they look like. They're fine with it. Some of them dress very, very college age, and I'm really like, wow, you're more on top of the trends than I am, and it's really funny to look at. But there's just like a huge range because they're like at different, I guess they're like different maturities, or they're like different responses to that. So they have such like a different style or like a different look, I guess you could say. And it's hard for me to be like, oh, this is like a concrete look that young people have nowadays. At least that's what I see.
No, I mean, I think I can't tell you any different. You're speaking on what you've seen with your own eyes, but yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I will say I'm still that young adult who I just wear whatever my parents bought. Like I'm not out here following trends or anything like that.
We're both wearing t-shirts. My t-shirt says something about a dog on it.
Yeah.
There's no high fashion
Yeah.
here.
Would you say it goes hand in hand with capitalism or no?
I mean, that would be like the rational response, right? Like, there's a really big consumer culture, so they're selling you a certain look, they're selling you a certain style. But I think, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I feel like that was way stronger when we were younger. Like, there was a lot of brand loyalty, right? Like, you want to buy, like, this particular brand to look good, or you want to wear this particular, like brand's clothing. But now I feel like it's much more like, this is a style, or this is a look, or like an overall impression you want to give. So you don't have to buy from the same brand. You just have to make it a cohesive look that like falls into a certain style.
Interesting.
I don't know. Would you agree with that? Do you still have a lot of brand loyalty that you see?
Me, or that I see, it's very niche. It's very niche. I mean, you have some people who, of course, they very much feed into designer. Oh, I need to wear my Louis Vuitton, Gucci, things of that nature, yada yada yada. I'm not one of those people. That being said, I like Lululemon, which I will say Lululemon overpriced for sure. However, fantastic quality. That's why I buy it, albeit pretty rarely. I love Uniqlo right here. And that's about it. Sometimes H&M, but so that's me. But different people subscribe to different things. But I will certainly agree with you that like it's the customization in your fashion, like maybe the vibe you're trying to emit. That's definitely an example of whatchamacallit, self-expression. So I mean I think that's a good thing. But simultaneously it's like maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm naive. Like sure, I can look at what you're wearing, but it doesn't mean that much to me. It just means, oh, this person's comfortable wearing something eccentric. Or, oh, this person's very into high fashion. oh, this person values comfort, et cetera, et cetera. But like, until we have a conversation, I don't judge you. I don't know a thing about you. You could be a total jerk. You could be the coolest person in the world. You could be reserved. You could be flamboyant. You could be all those things. I don't really know until we have a conversation. That's how I feel. Yeah.
So, and it seems more like, and I think I would also agree with this, for you, clothing is like an accessory. It's like an extra thing. It gives you extra information, but it doesn't really determine anything about people.
Right.
I think I'm more familiar with lookism in like physical features or like the way that your face looks or the way that your body looks. I'm not so familiar with clothing, I would say.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. I just that was just the route that the conversation was taking. And but when you say that, so I was jotting down some notes for this discussion, and of course, I think this is a good talking point because, I mean, it kind of connects to you. Obviously, you're ethnically Korean, but an American citizen. We've talked about it before. I don't know how much in touch you are with like South Korean culture, but I mean, we both know it's decently like commonly known knowledge. I think that plastic surgery, just cosmetic surgery, is very common in young South Korean women, and to me that just screams lookism. That is like the epitome of lookism in culture today. That is to say, to me, it's so sad. I mean, I don't know if that's like politically incorrect. I think it's sad. I think it's messed up. I think it's almost sick, because the way I interpret it is that in this culture, and I know South Korean culture is very different. It's similar and different from what we have here in the U.S. I know capitalism is very prevalent there, but the point I'm trying to make is if we're fostering an environment in which our children, our citizens, feel like they must physically alter themselves in order to feel adequate in society, that just seems wrong to me. That just seems inherently wrong. And again, kind of like what you said before, I respect the autonomy of an individual. Like, if you want to get the surgery, by all means, go for it. That's your choice. It's your life to live. But it is not a good thing when the societal pressures are so great that people feel like they don't even have a choice, if that makes sense. Do you have anything to input?
I think like there's like a big change in this now. Again, like I'm Korean American, so I'm aware of the trends, but I'm probably like a year or two behind like the news changing. I know that was the whole idea of like you need to look a certain way to get a job. That was something that was really prevalent still up to like 5 years ago, I'd say, because a lot of employers in Korea, if you want to apply for a job, they ask you for like a headshot. They want to see what you look like, and they are gauging whether your look is appropriate for the company, and that's like what it's about.
So, I mean, that's like, boom, that's the definition of lookism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that wasn't even like challenged. It wasn't even questioned. And a lot of people, and like I still get this now, where people, Korean people will go to and be like, "Oh, you'd be so much prettier, if you did this," or "You'd be, you're really pretty, but like you would look a little better if you had this." It's very common.
Wait, sorry, did you say people say that to you?
Yeah, all the time. That's like, it's very common. Sir, it's very common. Yeah, people do that.
Well, I disagree with them. I disagree with them.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you feel confident in your own skin, because I think every human being should.
Well, okay, but here's where I'm like kind of hypocritical, because I also know that people do say that to me. People will say that to me, pretty casually. But at the same time, I know that by Korean standards, I am considered like I fit in pretty well.
Okay.
I'm considered to be like fairly pretty, and I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. But there's always like suggestions for like, this is better, this is like more. But I think now like there's a lot more acceptance for women, especially because you mentioned earlier, right? Like you think women are much more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think just in society in general, not necessarily here in America or in the West or whatever, generally women are more scrutinized when it comes to their appearance, which I think is definitely a shame. and it's messed up, but that's the way things are for some reason, and I think we have to change it. I mean, I will be the first to say men certainly face unique challenges and societal pressures, and women do as well. That's that's what I say. But yeah, I think, I mean, maybe I'm being too idealistic, but judge someone for their character. Like, are you a kind person? Are you compassionate? Are you honest? Do you have integrity? That's all that matters, in my opinion.
Oh no, I completely agree with that, and I think that's also like really like it's important to take that into account because you're like, well, that's like what a person actually is. Their looks are it's an outer shell
Yeah,
that
yeah.
no offense, it degrades over time and it changes and it's normal. But that I think is like that thing you said about value. That's one of the things that people explain it as. Like, if you have the ability to make yourself look better, but you choose not to, what does that say about you as a person that you could improve yourself, but you don't? And they're saying like that is a negative.
Yeah, and
Which,
yeah. I mean, I can comment. Like, to me, that's kind of mind-boggling. I think, I mean, you you feel good, right? You feel comfortable in your own skin.
yeah, for the most part. Except when I
To
eat a
me,
lot of cookies.
to me,
And I feel
that's
really
like.
tired.
Wait, sorry. What'd you say?
Except for when I eat a lot of cookies and I feel really tired.
Hey, we've all been there. We've all been there. To me, that's the pinnacle of self fulfillment and knowledge, and not knowledge, excuse me, like worth, just value. Because look, don't get me wrong, like no one's perfect. I'm never gonna say I'm perfect, and I'm not. No one's perfect, and that's okay. That's okay. But if you can love yourself and love what you can, maybe some people want to say love what God gave you, love what your parents gave you, then that's pretty dang cool in my opinion. That sounds like someone who's oozing confidence and just competence as well.
And like you said, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, you go for it.
Okay. I was gonna say maybe that's also like like over time, I think the whole idea of like self acceptance or self love, for me that's become more like not just like accepting the way you look now, but also like accepting like, oh, it's gonna change. Like that's not the way the human body works. It's not gonna stay stationary and like that's something that you should expect and you should just like roll with. You should just be fine with that, like at every stage. But I guess like connecting back to that capitalism thing you were mentioning, Lookism is a lot about presenting and creating a product and then expecting it to stay that way. So it needs to stay that way. You need to look a certain way and then you need to maintain that, which is I don't know, I think there's like a lot of pressure for women to do that, like aging gracefully, I guess is like the way that people put it. But men have like different expectations
Very true.
for aging.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'd agree with you. Do you think there's an issue with that, or like why do you think it is? I mean, you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to. I haven't really given it that much thought, but
Wait, the aging thing?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there is like a whole tangent about this, specifically about older female actresses who like once they age out of like typical acting age, people are like, oh, they're past their prime, they're not good actors or actresses anymore. And people will say that. Well, in Korea, there's actually like a whole host of like Korean actresses who are considered to be older. They're still incredibly beautiful and incredibly skilled, and people are like, why are they considered past their prime? They're so powerful. Like they shouldn't be dismissed just because of their age. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. Like focusing on youth isn't necessarily
It's
isn't a good thing.
yeah,
Like
it's kind of
at all times.
backwards. It's kind of backwards. Not backwards, but illogical, I should say.
Yeah, it's weird. Go ahead.
Yeah, youth is fleeting. Yeah, but I mean, that's pretty much everything I have to say. I mean, again, we're visual creatures as human beings. It's kind of our natural tendency. I mean, I'd say I'm guilty of it. I'd say most people are guilty of it. We have biases towards attractive people for whatever reason that might be. I mean, it's kind of in our DNA, in our nature. But that being said, I think it can be very dangerous in society when we start to connect or make equal our self-worth make it so, what's the word I'm trying to say? Our
Make it
self-worth
so
is
like,
not inherent to our outward appearance or how attractive we think we are or how presentable we think we are. And I think if society is teaching us that that is the case, it can be dangerous and it can allow things like mental illness to fester, and you're going to create a sick society. That's what I think.
and I was like 2 seconds away from being like, but that is what our society teaches us, that our self-worth is attached to our looks, and that's why it's a problem. And it's unfortunately, but it's like the weird thing is it manifests differently across like different cultures.
Very true.
Like different cultures have different beauty
Very
expectations.
true. Well, that's why we're having this conversation, right?
That's true. Although I guess it's two Americans.
So
We have a
if you
fairly
could prescribe a behavioral outlook on how people better ought to act in order to make society better, more accepting and just conducive to harmony and less judgment, less animosity, less discrimination, what would you say?
That's.
If you
I was gonna.
No, go for it.
I. I think logically, the only like the biggest thing is just like removing any expectation. Like you shouldn't have like a certain expectation of how someone's gonna look. But I don't think that's possible because we all like have expectations for that are like formed naturally. Maybe it would be better to have like don't try to like fix the whole problem at once. Try to like take baby steps, but try to look at like different types of beauty standards and like different cultures, different ages, different genders, things like that to get like a wider kind of sample size. And then from that you can say like, oh, okay, a lot of people look a lot of different ways and I'll just like roll with it. Like I have a lot more experience with that. And then I think from there's less expectation to be like a single like monopolized image for what you need to look like. What do you think?
No, I think you're pretty spot on with what you said. That was a very interesting outlook that I've never really considered myself. But I mean, again, I'll say kind of a cop-out answer. It's what I said before. And like, this isn't me saying I'm the perfect non-judgmental person, but kind of, I like my outlook. My outlook is just judge. So like, don't judge anyone unless they're a jerk, unless they're like selfish or just rude for whatever reason. Like, nice people come in all shapes and sizes. Some nice people are very handsome, very beautiful, etc. Some nice people are less attractive. Nothing wrong with that. If you can be kind and just contribute, if you have positivity to share with the world, then that's what matters. I don't know. Sounds cheesy, but that's how I feel.
I mean, that's the ideal.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.